Hi everyone, Janie here, and I want to tell you about a new craft store that I just discovered online. It's called Fairy Stamper, and I discovered it when I had watched Amanda, who is Rise and Procrastinate here on YouTube. She was using a die from there that I just had to have, and I'll put a link below to Amanda's video so that you can see it. And anyways, I went to Fairy Stamper to get that, and I discovered a whole new world. They have some amazing things that I think you're going to love. In fact, I know you're going to love, especially if you are crafting with a limited craft supply. And so you don't have a bunch of inks and a bunch of markers and all of that. You are going to love this. So let's head on over and I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using today, but I'll let you know there'll be more videos. These are the products from Fairy Stamper that I'm going to be using today for the card that I'm making, and they're all a part of their Fairy Hugs line. I'll be using these two stamps, and the one with the fairy I believe is pronounced Sienna, and the little mushrooms are called Mini Dancing Mushrooms. And I'll also be using one of the Fairyscapes. They come 6 in a package, and this one is called Purple Fairy, and it is so beautiful. I'm also going to be using the Fairy Hugs Premium Pigment Ink in Raven Black, and I fell in love with this the first time I used it. And of course, on a fairy card, we need some glitter, right? So I'm going to be using this Iris Glitter and Pixie Dust Glitter. And to really bring it to life, I'm going to be using these Easy Lights from Pear Blossom Press. However, this card is just as beautiful if you don't want to use the Easy Lights. My card is going to be 6 by 6, so for the card base I cut a 12 by 12 piece of white cardstock in half, and then I folded that in half to make a 6 by 6 card base. You can also use a scoreboard if you have one. Next, I'm using my MISTI to line the stamp up where I want it. If you don't have a MISTI, of course you can just use an acrylic stamp block. Once I have that all lined up where I want it, I'm actually going to be removing this and replacing it with my card base. And yep, I had to make sure I had it going the right direction. I'm using the Fairy Hugs ink to stamp that image onto my card base. I really love this ink. It stamps so beautifully. Now, you might be wondering, why am I stamping the image on my card base? And that is because it's going to come in handy later when adding the lights. Okay, if you're wondering what I'm using for a pressure tool, that is actually an air hockey pusher. It works great. And next, I'm going to stamp that image again, and this time on the Fairyscapes background. And I will be heat embossing that with clear embossing powder to make it stand out and give it a little dimension. I'm stamping it a couple times just to make sure it's wet enough for the embossing powder to stick to. Better safe than sorry, you know what I mean? Well, I'm happy to say the embossing powder stuck beautifully and it embossed beautifully. Sorry I didn't show me heat embossing, but I will make sure I show you next time. The good news is it came out beautiful. Now I'm going to position the dancing mushroom stamp and repeat the same process that I did with the first stamp. Oh, I absolutely love how this turned out. And that sweet little scene is exactly as it is on the card base. And talking about the card base, I'm going to be using this close to my heart glitter paper as the base of the card, and as always, I'm going to be cutting out the center of it since no one is going to see it, and I hate for my glitter paper to go to waste. You can do this with a paper trimmer or with a die like I'm doing. Next, I trimmed 1/8 of an inch off from each of the 4 sides of the card because not only do I want a 1/4 inch border, but I also want to make sure that the images on the card topper line up perfectly with the images on the card base. Next, I'm going to glue the glitter cardstock onto the base, and as you can see, no one will ever know the center was cut out, and I can still see the stamped images that I'm going to be using to line up the easy lights. Because I don't want the white edges of the cardstock to show, I'm going to ink the edges with Dusty Concord Distress ink, and that way it all kind of blends together. You can do this technique with any cardstock or paper and any ink that you might have. Next, I'm going to be putting a little of this beautiful Fairy Hugs Iris glitter around the edges. To do this, I'm just using a tiny paintbrush to add the glue around the edges, and then I'll sprinkle on the glitter. It's an easy way to add a little sparkle. And what would a fairy card be without sparkle, right? These glitters actually come with an awesome cap that lets you either sprinkle it out or pour it out. And yet here I am taking the lid off. Isn't that pretty? And I'm going to be using the same technique to add Fairy Hugs Pixie Dust to the wings. But I'm going to do that off camera so that I can get a better view and make sure that I'm getting it where I want it. Doesn't that look absolutely beautiful? Okay, now for the lights. I'm using these easy lights by Pear Blossom Press. They come with the batteries and the switches with the attached wires and lights, which makes this so easy to do. There's the switch, and all you need to do is place the lights where you want them and tape them down, and then gently coil the excess wire out of sight and tape them down as well. I just use Scotch tape to do that. I glued the switch down with a combination of double-sided tape and Beacon Fabri-Tac, and now I'm adding a double layer of foam tape so that the card topper would rest at the same level as the light switch. And I also added a little Fabri-Tac to the first layer of the foam tape to make sure it adhered to the glitter paper. Now back to the card topper. I punched holes where the spots were on the mushroom as well as a couple of other spots to allow the light to show through. Oh, and I forgot, I wanted to show you that these card toppers are really heavy cardstock and are not flimsy at all. Anyway, I punched the holes with my Crop-A-Dile, and you can also do it with a pokey tool. Okay, now I'm going to add a piece of vellum to the back of the card topper, and I'm going to do that with some double-sided tape. The vellum is a backing for those holes, and also it helps disperse the light. And now that that's done, I'm going to add some Stardust stickles over the holes that I punched. I thought this would look pretty instead of just having the open holes against the vellum. And I thought it was a perfect idea to add a few rhinestones. What do you think? And down on the bottom corner, right above the switch, I wrote push, but you can hardly see it, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. So I have the card base all ready and the lights in place, and now it's time to put the top on. If you want to see a step-by-step tutorial on how to use the easy lights, I'll put a link below in the description box, as well as a link on the screen at the end of this video. So I removed the backing from the foam tape and added a little Beacon Fabri-Tac so that I can have a little wiggle room while putting the card top on so that I can get it positioned perfectly. And here it is finished, and it's more beautiful than I imagined. Those lights really bring it to life. But if you don't have easy lights, it will be just as beautiful. And I didn't have to do any ink blending for the background or coloring for the image. And here is another card that I made using a scrap from my paper stash and no lights. Isn't it just adorable? Thank you all for stopping by today. And if you like that, there's going to be more. And not all of it is fairies. In fact, I think you should stop by Fairy Stamper and check out what they have. And I'm going to put a link to their shop below in the description box so you can't miss it. Happy crafting, everyone.
If
Bye-bye.
you like this video, I hope you give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed, I hope you consider that too. And if you do, be sure to click the little bell next to the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos or giveaways. And I hope you stop by Crafters Castle on Facebook and also Crafters Castle Challenge blog to enter your creations.